Hey guys, King of Charmanders here. Alright, so this is a data graph or an infograph from YTX Pikachu. I have his Twitter link in the description. If you really want to get a lot of data, like from like common teams, etc., he does these things all the time, puts together these spreadsheets, and he's a really good battler. He's one of our best in the Bay Area over here. I actually fought him in a tournament, and this was a long time ago, so I definitely would throw a lot better hands at him now than I did back in the day, but he kicked my butt back in the day, because I actually didn't know anything back in the day. But I can beat him now. I can. Yeah. Anyways, YTX Pikachu is a great dude. As you see here, he gave us this great spreadsheet. These are the most common teams from Percentile that you will see in Go Battle League, or have very active battlers have used. But I think the data is I think it's pretty common because I've seen a lot of these teams around, and the top 5 actually features very popular teams that you probably have seen lately. So I'm going to analyze these 5 teams, like the top 5, so the ones up here. I'm not going to do the rest of them because it's a lot to analyze a ton of teams. So, well, actually, you know what? Skip that. We'll do the top 10. Top 10 should give you a really great glimpse of like why everyone's using things, except because like some of these teams are so common, like the Hypno Scrafty Umbreon, that's my friend Fergie's core. I'm not gonna go too in depth into that team. I'm going to actually I'll skim over it a lot faster than other ones that I haven't gone over yet. Anyways, let's get started. Again, these are gonna be we're gonna do the top 10 teams for this analysis. Alright, so team number 10 features Deoxys Defense, Azu, and Umbreon. Deoxys D is your lead, Azu is your safe switch, and Umbreon is your closer, I'm guessing. However, it doesn't really say that the movesets for Deoxys Defense and Azumarill, so I'm going to assume it's the most powerful movesets. I'm also going to assume it's a player of Azu because that's what most Azus are running nowadays. Azu is a popular safe switch, so to win the mirror, most players are running Play Rough so that you can win the mirror. Also, Play Rough also does really well against Double Dark, so that's why Azu normally will run Play Rough. As you see here, this is a great team. Has a ton of bulk because all 3 of these mons are very, very... Well, this team's honestly like super meta, just because you have 3 of the tankiest mons in the game put together. Which I'm guessing is why this team is put together. Have a ton of bulk, and then just absolutely like out-tank your opponent. Great consistency, great across the board, pretty safe as well. As you see here, this team does really well against the meta because guess what? It is super meta, so I'm not going to deal too much of it into as far as the meta scorecard goes. Not a super unique team. You can flip around movesets with, so you can run Play Rough Ice Beam Azu, and you can run Rock Slide Psycho Boost Azu. I run Rock Slide personally just because it works for my team, and also Rock Slide gives you the flyer coverage. I like pressuring with I play a very aggressive Deoxys defense game, so I like pressuring with DD. That's why I use Rock Slide. With Rock Slide and Psycho Boost, I'm very that's my favorite variation, and I'm like the CEO of Triple. If you see my TikTok, I'm like the CEO of Triple Psycho Boost. Well, that's what people call me, so yeah. Alright, self-proclaimed, but like what most people call me. Anyways, back to the analysis. So the potential threats for this one is basically going to be grass types. Mostly just because of, Azumarill and, unfortunately, Deoxys Defense and Umbreon don't have the best matchups against Frenzy Planters. Venusaur can get taken out by Deoxys Defense with Psycho Boost, however, you kind of have to play it really well because triple Psycho Boost, or managing energy for Psycho Boost to begin with, is very difficult, so trying to get it done is, like I said, it's a difficult play to do, so that's why most people don't like Deoxys Defense to switch, at least with Psycho Boost. So again here, the Frenzy Planters will take you out as well as Galvantula. Galvantula runs this team over just because of... Well, it doesn't really run it over. It's just going to give you a really, really hard time because Galvantula pretty much wrecks your entire lineup. So you got to pull something fancy. If you have Rock Slide, you can take out Galvantula with Deoxys Defense and pressure shields. However, if you don't have a Deoxys Defense with Rock Slide and you're running Thunderbolt, you're in trouble. That's another justification for rocking Rock Slide, by the way. So it's up to you. Team number 9 features Skarmory, Vigoroth, Swampert. So Vigoroth is actually, it's a great safe switch in this meta, even though there's a lot of fighters running around, just because Body Slam does so much damage. Vigoroth will also win CMP against a lot of things, so it puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. Obviously, the Skarmory Swampert core has been insanely powerful for, since, last freaking year, so I'm not going to go too much into it. Skarm core is very powerful. This one features Skarmory in the lead. Skarmory is very popular because it's tanky. Swampert, obviously, because of Hydro Cannon, and the fact that it has Sludge Wave allows it to cover its weaknesses, which is grass. Unless you see a Ferrothorn, then you can cry because that thing just resists everything. Well, not resist everything, but it's gonna hurt a lot. Anyways, as you see here, this team doesn't have a lot of coverage or bulk. It doesn't really have a lot of bulk, however, Skarmory is a great tank. So because of that, Skarmory can do a lot of, well, all three of these can deal a lot of damage in a short amount of time. That's why it's extremely consistent. Also, pretty safe. Again, Vigoroth is a very good safe switch just because of the body slam pressure it puts on you. And again, not very bulky just because Vigoroth and Swampert aren't very bulky. However, Skarmory has a ton of defense, so can kind of make up for that. As you see here against top meta picks, obviously one of your biggest problems is probably going to be Azu, just because Azu does do very well against all three of your picks. Same thing with a lot of other water picks, and fighters can give you a little bit of a problem. Not all fighters, but as you see here, some fighters, like, for example, Hitmontop can give you a hard time. The Medicham XL with Power Punch can also run through a Skarmory in the 2 shield, so it would be very dangerous to encounter one in the lead. Just keep that in mind. Also, it does lose against a lot of top... There's a lot of top meta picks that beat Skarmory. Well, if you use Skarmory a lot, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But if you play Skarmory out, you know how to pivot out of a lot of things. Vigoroth is your safe switch, Swampert is your closer. Now, as I mentioned over here, the water meta is your worst nightmare, or rather the water hybrid meta, which is Azumarill and Jellicent. Those are your top things. And along with other fighters like Primate Pariyama, just because fighters essentially can run over Skarmory just by out-damaging it, so just keep that in mind. You won't see too many Manteens or Pripluffs around, so I wouldn't worry about that, but again, fighters and the water ghost and water fairy, which is Azu and Jellicent, do very well against this team. Again, just switch in a Vigoroth, Wind Switch, do heavy damage, and then align with Skarmory and Swampert accordingly. Team number 8 features Stunfisk, Pelipper, Venusaur. This is a very popular variation. Stunfisk and Pelipper do really well because of the amount of pressure they put in, and Pelipper is like one of the best safe switches in Great League right now. Venusaur, the grass in the back is very common because Venusaur or Tropius is usually in this place. That's one of the top teams on PV Poke. Venusaur works as well, as you see if you put in the back over here, just because it's insanely powerful. Puts a lot of pressure, and it also has a lot of resistances. It's basically, if you don't have Tropius, put Venusaur in there. And it still works very, very well. It's also cheaper. Anyways, this team is very, very good. Extremely safe. That's what's great about this team. It's very, very safe. For example, if they throw their Swampert into you as a safe switch, guess what? You just run it down with Venusaur. And, of course, Pelipper, as I mentioned, is a fantastic switch. Hurricane and win back switch, or you Weather Ball things to death. It's very, very good. As you see here, doesn't really have a lot. It technically doesn't have a lot of bulk, but it makes up for it with just the sheer amount of damage output it does, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Good coverage, good consistency, really great team. Deoxys defense doesn't really give you too much of a problem with this team. The only issue is that in the 2 shield, it can kind of run over G-Fist. So your poor Pancake / Bear Trap / the recent comment I got was Flip Flop definitely goes down into 2 shield. So, well, it can. The keyword is can. So, yeah, just be careful of that. Anyways, other things like Scrafty, basically losing the lead. If you lose the lead, you just say switch into Pelipper, and then if they switch a positive matchup against you with, like, for example, you win the lead and they switch something into you, guess what? You just switch accordingly. That's all I have to say. Anyways, this team's pretty generic, not too... Pretty super meta core. Well, technically, Venusaur is kind of super meta now, just because grass types have kind of made a resurgence because of double steel. Anyways, as you see here, you do very well against a lot of the metas. Your only 2 potential threats, again, are Deoxys defense. Deoxys defense isn't too much of a threat. You pretty much wall Deoxys defense is all of its charge moves. You resist Rock Slide, Psycho Boost, and Thunderbolt with Pancake, so you're very good. Also, Berserker, I wouldn't count Berserker being around. Yeah, don't count a Berserker. Berserker is not a problem, not really too much of an issue. You won't see too many of those around. Especially with the popular fighter meta around. You won't see too many Berserkers. And a little bit of fighters like Medicham, Venusaur, and Mew. So a few problems. So Grass gives you basically what Stunfisk loses to. Otherwise, you have a lot of play against with your back row. Again, safe switch with Pelipper, and then close out with Venusaur. Again, super meta team. Just play it out accordingly. Try to win switch with Pelipper or take as many shields as you can. And then pressure with Venusaur or Galarian Stunfisk. Not too hard to run. You probably have seen this team before, and it's very, very good. Venusaur, Bastiodon, and Stunfisk is team number 7. I hate this team. I'm just gonna put it out there. I hate this team. The reason being, the double steel team works really well because of the Weather Ball meta. Bastiodon can still beat A9 and Pelipper. Yeah, Bastiodon can basically beat A9 and Pelipper if they don't have shields on them, which is why double steel works. Because of the Weather Ball meta being so popular, as long as Bastiodon avoids Politoed, it's pretty much good. This team features Bastiodon as your closer, Galarian Stunfisk as your safe switch, but this team's actually, the strategy with this team is very, very brain dead. You win the lead with Venusaur and switch in accordingly, or you sack Venusaur, or you switch into Galarian Stunfisk. That's really all you do. You sacrifice a lead, or you switch into G-Fisk, take shields, and then you just smack down with Bastiodon all day. Or you Frenzy Plant with Venusaur. So the ultimate thing is just to lock... The ultimate thing with this team, and why it's so annoying, is because this team either wins hard, or it doesn't really win hard or lose hard, because these three mons are very powerful, but rather this team basically banks that Bastion in the back gets locked into a super positive matchup, or just, or whatever's in the back is so hurt, or like, you can't kill Bastion. That's basically it. This team basically goes like I mentioned before. Yes, you can beat Bastiodon, however, if you get locked, if your Alolan Ninetales gets locked into a Bastiodon, guess what? It technically walls you, so you're gonna have a very hard time trying to take it down, no matter what you do. Same thing with Pelipper. Yes, Pelipper has Weather Ball, however, it takes 5 Weather Balls to kill Bastiodon. So you're gonna have to have a ton of energy and waste a lot of resources on Bastiodon. This is why this team's so annoying. Anyways, now that I gave you the deep analysis on one of the most annoying teams in the meta, in my opinion, here you go. Yes, it's bulky. Yes, it's consistent because of the strategies that I mentioned to you before. This team is also, however, this team, if you have a fighter or if you have a Stunfisk in the back, guess what? You did essentially murder this team as long as you don't misplay really, really hard. Yeah. Essentially, basically. Anyways, if you see here, like I mentioned, your biggest weaknesses are probably going to be fighters. Altaria is not so much of a problem. Altaria gets walled against Bastiodon, or Bastiodon walls it. So, again, basic strategy, find the flyer, destroy the flyer, essentially. Or, yeah. As you see here, Venusaur is meant to deal with the fire elite. So, if you fight something like triple counter, you basically destroy this team, but yeah. As you see here, Venusaur does very well against the lead meta as of right now, so that's basically it. One of the most viable leads, and then just couple double steal. Yeah. As you see, like I mentioned, this team loses really hard against fighters. The thing that you pray that you do not see is that there's a fighter in the back, or if there's a G-Fisk in the back. Now, if there's a G-Fisk in the back, you probably have some play against it, but, that's just basically it. This is what this team loses against. This team takes advantage of the flyer pattern in the back, as well as, like I mentioned, the Weather Ball meta in the back. Because, again, Bastiodon can pretty much destroy Pelipper or A9 as long as he gets lined up against it, as you see here. But, pretty generic team. You probably have fought this before. It's probably annoyed you because it's been annoying the meta since last season. Yeah. Team number 6 actually features Galvantula, Azu, Stunfisk. I'm not going to go too deep into this team. This is one of those super generic teams. Galvantula, Azu is a popular core just because Galvantula, with Lunge, you can create a lot of plays. Azu is a great safe switch. And, of course, you got G-Fisk in the back. Common picks. Common picks and also common teams. So, yeah, it's a great, generally across the board. It's very, very good. I'm going to go over this one really quickly because, like I said, these are very, this team isn't too hard to see. You say switch with Azu, or you switch with G-Fisk if you win the lead with Galvantula. Galvantula is a great lead because it does good against the Flyers, and it also does good against the Dark and Psychic meta. As you see here, Galvantula does very, very well as long as you do not see G-Fisk or Flyer in the front, as well as Swampert. If you avoid these three, you'll do pretty good. Also, Medicham, just because Medicham does... I don't understand why fighting resists bug. I really don't. Like, Pokemon logic, but it's Pokemon, so yeah. That's why Medicham does well, or XL does well against Galvantula, because Lunge doesn't do much. Discharge, yes, so, yeah. But, very generic team. Galvantula's a very good lead. You lose lead, say switch in Azu. It's that simple. Also, I'm going to assume that this is a play rough Azu just because of, like I mentioned, the Darks in the back, and that's the popular variation, so you can win against the mirror. Galvantula, you see, is very powerful. This team's only holes are basically Shrapnel and Cradley. However, also loses against, like, Galvantula against Flyers, like Tropius. Flyers, let's see what else. Swampert can also give you a hard time because it does resist the crap out of Galvantula, and Azu will end it pretty much. Yeah, unless you lock in a G-Fisk and you're fine. But as you see here, grass types can be your worst nightmare. And, well, ground types can be a worse number. Not grass types. Ground and grass. So, this team is very, very good. Very generic. Not too hard to run. Like I mentioned before, Galva's a great lead. You can either choose to debuff before you switch out. However, if it's a really bad lead, switch into Azu, realign, GG's. That's pretty much it. Alright, now we enter the top 5. So, top 5, you have Venusaur, Sableye, and Galarian Stunfisk. So this is a very generic team. Well, not very generic. I think I've talked about this team before. My buddy Romel actually created this team. He created it back in like season, I forgot which season he created it, but it took him to Legend. He really liked the Venus Stunfisk core and putting Sableye as your safe switch. I think someone asked me a question about this team as well, but this team is very good. Sableye is a fantastic safe switch, or the best safe switch in the game in my opinion, other than Pelipper. Well, statistically, it's the best save switch, but this one and Pelipper do so well because they have a nuke move, and 2, they have a very high pressure, high damage other charge move, and their fast move does a decent amount of damage. Sableye more than Pelipper, I think, because of Shadow Claw. Because of Shadow Claw. Yeah, Shadow Claw does better than Wing Attack. But anyways, very good team. Again, I'm going to go through this one really quickly. General coverage, not a lot of bulk, but that doesn't really matter just because, like, this team makes up for the damage output puts out. Again, Sableye safe switch. And then you have GFS as your closer. Very generic. You win the lead with Venusaur, you switch in which one accordingly. As you see here, this team does very well. It's very, very good overall. Very good. And your biggest weaknesses are actually going to be like fire types, ironically. Now, the reason why fire types are going to be your biggest weakness is because of Stunfisk and Venusaur being weak to them. Technically, but because Stunfisk has Rock Slide, you have coverage against fire types. Flyers also give you a little bit of problem switching to Sableye pure. All you do is you switch into Sableye and you nuke everything with return, okay? If you hit a return, and 9 times out of 10, whatever you are facing, all you have to do is foul play it to death. That's literally what you do with Sableye. And that's why it's so good. Basically like a Pelipper, except return. Yeah, basically it's like Pelipper, but return it does more damage. Well, I don't know which one does more damage. They're good moves, okay? I gotta look at that up later. Anyways, again, fire is going to be your greatest weakness with this team. Really great team. Very, very good. Venus Stunfisk core is powerful, and also Sableye is a fantastic safe switch. Alright, team number 4 uses a Skarmory Swampert core along with Galvantula. Basically, Galvantula is a better safe switch. I think, what was the team that actually used it? Well, no, it's what it is. Anyways, Skarm, Galvantula, Swampert. The Skarm Swamp core is very powerful, very popular, and just features Galvantula as a safe switch. Very generic. The thing about Galvantula as a safe switch, it's still a really good safe switch. You debuff whatever the heck comes into you, and then you just use Skarmory and Swampert accordingly. Very consistent, will do a lot of high damage. Not very bulky, just because Galvantula is kind of squishy. Other than that, I'm not going to go too deep in this team, like I mentioned before. Pretty generic. Safe switch Galvantula, and then you just realign accordingly. Or you just throw... Yeah, basically, yeah, it's super generic, okay? Your biggest weakness of this team will be a Lantern, actually, which is kind of ironic, but Swampert doesn't do very bad against Lantern, especially if it's a Spark one. If it's a Water Gun one, you might have some trouble, but as long as you shield the Hydro Pump, you should be okay. Skarmory doesn't do well against this, however. Skarmory doesn't do as well as Galvantula. Well, Galvantula actually doesn't do bad as long as, like what I mentioned, it's not a Water Gun Lantern. Anyways, this team is very good because it does very well against a lot of this. It's good, okay? Skarm Swamp Core, popular, very good because of damage output. Most overpowered community day move, which is Hydro Cannon, by the way. And also a giant metal burb with Spider safe switch. If you lose lead, switch into Galvantula, realign like I mentioned before, and then do it, okay? It's very generic. That's it. Team number 3 is a team you've seen before. It's one of my friends, Fergie. It's a very generic. It's a good team. It's a good team, but it's like you probably have seen this core before. The reason why his Hypno Double Tark team does so well is just because you got two bulky things in the back. Scrafty is a great fighter and also does a lot of things, and Umbreon is tanky. Basically, the Double Dark archetype is very good because it takes advantage of Ghost. And this team basically counters the Azu double Ghost line, or in the fact that Scrafty is a fighter and a dark type. So you do very well against psychic types. You do also do very well against Ghost, as well as you do well against Ghost as well as things like Bastiodon, etc. So that's why Scrafty is so good in the back. Umbreon's a giant tank. Hypno is a great generalist. So this is a great team put together. And the reason why it is so popular, it's easy to use. This team doesn't really feature a lot of things. You safe switch into Umbreon, you ramp up with Scrafty and Hypno. It's very easy to use. The ease of use and it can get you a lot of W's is why it's used so much. As you see here, it's as I mentioned, this is a great team, considerably great bulk, because all three of these mons are very bulky, and they have a lot of coverage against the meta, with your biggest weakness being an Ozwood Play Rough and Charmers. Not really, you can actually beat Charmers, it's just, if you see a Charmer, you're going to have to just put in a lot of work and just mash through their shields, and then try to, like, either have Scrafty, like, ramp up against the Wig. Well, actually, you don't want Scrafty against the Charmer. Last resort to death, or have Hypno take it out, either one. Also, you have a lot of options with this team. You can run Double Punch Hypno. You can run Focus Blast Hypno. This team is very versatile, very viable. And like I said, Steven, I think my buddy I think Ferg is still running this core. Is still running the Scrafty Hypno core. He's just using a Munchlax in the back. So I think that's the one he's using right now. But again, very good team, very popular team because again, easy to use, easy access for these Pokemon because you've probably had them. These have been around for a while, and again, they're great tanks. Alright, so I think this is a Medicham XL. Anyways, this team is incredibly generic. Medicham, Bastion, Stunfisk. This is the original core. This is the original core, I think, made by... I forgot who the heck it was made by. Anyways, this basically just replaces the Venusaur team, like I mentioned before, just because, same strategy. The fighter in the lead works a little better, just because... Well, Medicham just works a little better for several reasons. One, because Medicham fighter lead is very powerful, and Medicham can run over a lot of things in a 2-shield just because an XL is so good. It's actually the most powerful Pokemon statistically in Great League right now. And then you pair it with the most annoying wall-faced dinosaur, and then you have a Pancake. Overpowered Pancake. Registeel 2.0, the greatest thing since sliced bread. It is bread. It is called G-Fisk. Anyways, team's very generic. Well, I use the word very generic, where it's not really hard to explain. It's boring. You lose lead with Medicham, you safe switch into G-Fisk, and then you lock Bastion into the Flyer, which is mostly probably the reason why you're switching out of Medicham. Or you sack Medicham and then you just use Bastion and Stunfisk to run whatever in the back over, and you pray they don't have a fighter. That's basically it. Great team with great bulk. I can't, like, even though as much as I hate Bastion and as much as I hate the Bastion Stunfisk core, it's a good team. Again, all you have to do is basically pray they don't have a fighter in the lead or the back, and this team will do a lot of damage over time to where Bastion can pretty much smack down Stone Edge and Flamethrower whatever's in the closer. That's the basic strategy. Back Bastion in the back, and then poof. But if there's a fighter in the back, you die. Or a G-Fisk in the back, you die. It's that simple. You can possibly take out their opposing G-Fisk with your G-Fisk, but that's really just how the battle plays out. So you have to, yeah, it's, you either win good, you either lock in Bastion with a good matchup or a bad matchup. Or you just absolutely dominate your opponent. That's just been the basis of this team. And it's very, very easy to use. Yeah. Yeah.